Listen to me for a moment. You can't step into a new year carrying the old version of you that kept you stuck. Some of us are trying to climb with a weight we refuse to drop. If you're serious about rising in 2026, you have to confront the part of you that keeps choosing comfort over progress. That version of you isn't your friend, it's your anchor, and it's time to cut that anchor loose. Family, hear me clearly. Every season asks for a different version of you. What carried you yesterday may hold you back tomorrow. You have dreams inside you that keep calling your name, but the weaker version of you keeps answering first. The tired version, the doubtful version, the distracted version, the version that settles for what's easy instead of what's meaningful. 2026 isn't waiting for you to feel ready. It's waiting for you to decide. Decide that you're done repeating the same habits and expecting a new life. Decide that you're finished letting fear talk louder than your purpose. Decide that you won't keep shrinking just because growth feels uncomfortable. Tonight, I'm not here to give you hype. I'm here to challenge you. I'm here to shake the dust off the strength you forgot you had. There is a stronger, wiser, more focused you inside, and that person is ready to take the lead. But to rise, you must let the weaker version fall away. Let's talk about how to do that. When you stop feeding the habits that drain your strength, everything in your life begins to shift. Most people don't fall behind because they're weak. They fall behind because they keep giving their energy to routines that quietly pull them backward. It happens in small choices, the everyday moments where you settle for comfort instead of momentum. You wake up with good intentions, but you slip into old patterns that feel familiar. Those patterns don't attack you loudly. They whisper. They tell you it's fine to delay what matters. They tell you you'll get serious tomorrow. They tell you you've earned a break, even when the break keeps turning into another loop of stagnation. The weaker version of you survives on those whispers. It doesn't need much. It just needs your attention. Every time you choose what's easy instead of what helps you grow, it gets stronger. It becomes the version of you that speaks the loudest. It convinces you that discipline is too heavy, that change is too hard, that the life you want is too far away. But the truth is the opposite. The life you want is close. It's sitting on the other side of a few consistent decisions you keep postponing. When you decide to stop feeding the draining habits, you interrupt that cycle. You start noticing the little moments where you usually give in. You catch yourself reaching for distraction when you should be focusing. You notice when you're talking yourself out of things you know you need to do. You recognize the ways you numb your potential, not because you're incapable, but because you're used to avoiding the discomfort that growth brings. That awareness is the first sign of strength returning, not perfection, not sudden transformation, just awareness. Once you see the pattern, you can challenge it. You can pause instead of reacting. You can choose action instead of excuses. And that choice creates a new memory in your mind. It shows you what you're capable of when you stop feeding the habits that exhaust you. Over time, small decisions build new momentum. You begin trusting yourself again. You feel lighter because you're not dragging the same old cycles into every new attempt. The weak version of you loses its grip because it no longer gets the nourishment it used to rely on. A stronger version emerges, one that doesn't run from work, doesn't hide behind delay, and doesn't let old routines define your new season. This is how you step into a better life, by starving the patterns that once kept you stuck. When you replace emotional reactions with intentional choices, you take back control of your life. Most people don't realize how much energy they lose because they react without thinking. A moment of frustration pulls them off track. A small setback ruins an entire day. One comment, one inconvenience, one unexpected change pushes them into a spiral of thoughts they never meant to entertain. The weaker version of you lives in that place. It feeds on impulse. It moves fast, but without direction. It tells you to respond to everything the moment it hits you, even when that response only creates more noise and confusion. Strength grows in the space between the trigger and the decision. That space is small, but it's powerful. When you learn to slow down and breathe before you act, you stop letting emotions run the show. You stop giving temporary feelings the authority to shape long-term outcomes. You start responding from a grounded place, not the swirling thoughts that appear in heated moments. This doesn't mean you ignore your emotions. It means you stop letting them steer your life. You acknowledge them, but you choose your next step with clarity instead of pressure. Intentional choices come from a steady mindset. You decide what matters before the moment tests you. You decide what kind of person you want to be before the situation challenges that identity. When you walk into your day with direction, emotions can rise, but they don't have the power to detour you. You can feel overwhelmed and still stay committed. You can feel tired and still stay focused. You can feel annoyed and still choose peace. That's real strength. Not the absence of emotion, but the ability to hold emotion without letting it dictate your actions. The more you practice this, the more confidence you build. You start realizing you don't need to rush decisions. You don't need to respond to every criticism. You don't need to explain yourself to every misunderstanding. You stop giving away your peace to situations that don't deserve that much of you. The weaker version of you reacts because it feels threatened. The stronger version responds because it understands what's important and what isn't. Over time, intentional choices become your default. You move through challenges without losing your balance. You speak with purpose instead of impulse. You act based on who you're becoming, not who you used to be. This shift is subtle at first, but it transforms the way you think, the way you live, and the way you grow. When you protect your mind from unnecessary noise, you give yourself room to grow in ways you didn't realize were possible. Most of the noise in your life doesn't come from major problems. It comes from constant distractions that chip away at your focus a little at a time. It comes from scrolling without thinking, comparing yourself to people you don't even know, listening to opinions that don't align with your direction, and carrying thoughts that serve no purpose. The weaker version of you feels comfortable in that noise because it keeps you too busy to face what you need to change. Your mind is your most valuable space, and whatever fills it shapes your decisions. When your thoughts are crowded, your progress slows down. You start losing clarity about what matters. You mix other people's expectations with your own goals until you can't tell the difference. You lose hours without noticing because the noise keeps you distracted. That's how you drift instead of grow. Not through big mistakes, but through the slow pull of mental clutter that keeps your attention scattered in every direction. Protecting your mind starts with being intentional about what you let in. It's choosing what you listen to instead of absorbing everything that comes your way. It's recognizing when something drains you instead of fuels you. It's stepping back from conversations, content, or environments that stir confusion instead of focus. You don't have to consume everything, respond to everything, or carry every thought that enters your mind. You have the right to guard your mental space. When you begin filtering what deserves your attention, something powerful happens. You start hearing your own thoughts again. You start noticing your real desires, not the ones you picked up from comparison or pressure. You begin seeing your path more clearly. Your mind feels lighter because it isn't constantly processing noise. Creativity returns. Motivation feels natural again. You make decisions faster because you're not trying to balance 100 outside voices. The weaker version of you loses strength when your mind becomes clear. It can't hide behind distractions anymore. It can't use noise to keep you from confronting your potential. A focused mind creates a focused life, and a focused life creates momentum. When you protect your mind, you build an inner environment where growth isn't forced. It becomes the natural result of peace, clarity, and intention. That's when you start moving with purpose instead of confusion, and your next level becomes reachable because you're no longer mentally scattered. When you surround yourself with people who challenge your growth, you reshape your entire direction. The weaker version of you is kept alive by environments that expect nothing from you. It thrives around voices that say you're doing enough even when you know you're capable of more. It feels safe around people who avoid growth themselves because there's no pressure to rise. But safety like that comes with a hidden cost. It keeps you the same. It keeps you repeating the same patterns, thinking the same thoughts, and settling for the same results. Your environment is not neutral. It either pulls you forward or holds you in place. Every conversation you have leaves an imprint. Some people speak strength into you. Others pull your focus away from your purpose without even meaning to. And some people keep you comfortable in cycles you should have outgrown long ago. When you spend too much time around that energy, you start lowering your standards without noticing. You start shrinking your dreams so they fit the room you're in instead of stretching into the room meant for your future. Growth happens faster when you're surrounded by people who expect more from you. These aren't people who pressure you with comparison. They're people who remind you of your potential when you forget it. They ask questions that make you think deeper. They challenge excuses with honesty. They don't let you settle for the weaker version of yourself because they see the stronger version even when you don't feel it yet. Being around that kind of energy keeps you accountable in ways comfort never will. Sometimes growth requires distance, not anger. You don't need to cut people off with hostility. You just need to step back so you can step forward. You need to create space where your mind can expand, where your goals are taken seriously, and where your efforts are supported instead of minimized. When you shift your environment, your identity starts shifting too. You begin thinking bigger because the people around you think that way. You begin working harder because they work with intention. You begin believing more strongly in yourself because they speak from a place of encouragement and clarity. Over time, you'll notice your mindset changing. You'll no longer feel drawn to the same conversations that once entertained you. You'll crave deeper discussions, higher standards, and more meaningful progress. The weaker version of you doesn't survive in a room built for growth. It gets replaced by the version of you that's ready for more, the version that rises because the environment around you no longer allows you to stay small. When you keep promises to yourself, even the small ones, you rebuild a level of trust that changes everything about your life. Most people underestimate how deeply self-trust affects confidence. They think confidence comes from talent or results, but real confidence comes from knowing you can rely on your own word. Every time you say you'll do something and follow through, you strengthen the part of you that believes in your ability to grow. Every time you break that promise, you give the weaker version of yourself more influence. The weaker version doesn't need you to fail in dramatic ways. It survives through tiny broken commitments. Telling yourself you'll wake up earlier than hitting snooze. Planning to work on your goals than distracting yourself. Promising to create better habits than settling into old ones because they're familiar. Each moment seems small, but the impact builds quietly. Over time, those broken promises create doubt. They make you question your discipline. They make you hesitate when you start something new. You begin expecting yourself to quit because that expectation is all your past decisions have shown you. Keeping small promises is how you reverse that pattern. You start with commitments that are simple enough to complete, but meaningful enough to build momentum. You tell yourself you'll spend 10 minutes improving something in your life, then you actually do it. You say you'll finish a task today, and you refuse to let the day end until it's done. You choose consistency over drama. You don't try to prove anything to anyone else. You're proving something to yourself, and that proof reshapes your mindset. As you collect these small wins, you notice your confidence shifting. You feel more grounded because you're no longer arguing with your own intentions. You don't need external motivation as often because your follow-through becomes a natural part of your identity. You stop doubting your ability to grow because your actions keep confirming it. And that inner belief makes bigger commitments feel less intimidating because you've built a track record of showing up. Over time, this becomes a quiet strength. You don't announce your goals because you don't need validation. You don't fear setbacks because you trust yourself to keep going. You don't entertain excuses because you know how costly they become. Each promise kept becomes a brick in the foundation of a stronger, steadier version of you. And as that foundation grows, the weaker version slowly fades because self-trust is the one thing it cannot survive. When you let progress matter more than perfection, you finally give yourself permission to move forward without waiting for the perfect moment, the perfect plan, or the perfect version of yourself. The weaker version of you loves perfection because perfection keeps you stuck. It convinces you that you need more time, more clarity, more confidence before you begin. It makes you think the smallest flaw is a sign you're not ready. It keeps you rehearsing instead of living, planning instead of acting, and doubting instead of growing. Progress works differently. Progress invites you to show up exactly as you are and take the step you can take today. It doesn't require flawless execution. It asks for honesty, effort, and consistency. The strongest changes in life don't come from one perfect leap. They come from steady movement, the kind that builds layer by layer until the growth becomes undeniable. When you choose progress, you stop measuring yourself by impossible standards and start measuring yourself by direction. One of the biggest lies perfection whispers is that mistakes ruin everything. But in reality, mistakes teach you what no amount of thinking ever will. Mistakes shape judgment. They build resilience. They refine your understanding. Every step that feels messy becomes part of the foundation you stand on later. Progress doesn't fear mistakes because progress understands that learning is part of the journey. The weaker version of you avoids mistakes because it fears discomfort. The stronger version uses mistakes to get better. When you allow progress to lead, your mind begins to relax. You stop carrying the pressure of getting everything right on the first try. You treat each day as an opportunity instead of a test. You celebrate the small wins that used to feel insignificant. You recognize that showing up imperfectly still moves you forward. You begin valuing the process as much as the results, and that shift removes the weight that once held you back. Over time, progress becomes a habit. You stay consistent because consistency feels natural, not forced. You look back and notice that the small steps you once believed didn't matter became the reason your life expanded. You realize that growth isn't a dramatic transformation. It's the sum of ordinary moments where you kept moving even when you didn't feel ready. The weaker version of you wants perfection because it guarantees you never start. The stronger version wants progress because it knows every small step is a quiet act of strength. When you embrace progress, you create a life that moves forward with purpose, clarity, and steady momentum, and you leave behind the version of yourself that kept waiting for a perfect season that never came.